It started as one of those early 2000 summer trips that sounded better in theory than in practice. 5 of us, a beat-up blue Dodge Caravan, and 3 weeks to see America. No smartphones, no GPS, just a folded Rand McNally Atlas, burned CDs, and way too much caffeine. We were 20, maybe 21, invincible, broke, stupid. The plan was simple: drive from Ohio to California, sleep in cheap motels, and make memories. By day 2, the AC died somewhere outside St. Louis. By day 4, the van smelled like a mix of Doritos, sweat, and damp clothes. But honestly, we were having the time of our lives. Until that night in Kansas. We were behind schedule and decided to take a smaller highway instead of the interstate. The map said it was a shortcut. That word still makes my stomach twist. After about 40 minutes, we realized we hadn't passed another car. The road was narrowing, turning from asphalt to cracked concrete, then to gravel. The sun dipped low and the sky turned that eerie, bruised purple you only get before a storm. We were almost out of gas, so when a faded sign appeared, Miller's Junction, 8 miles, we all cheered. Except when we got there, it didn't look real. No lights, no people, just a main street of shuttered windows and sun-bleached gas pumps with regular 87 signs from a decade ago. The convenience store had a Pepsi logo from the 80s. A payphone hung off the wall by its cord. "Ghost town," Jay muttered, trying to sound casual, but his voice cracked. We pulled up to the pumps anyway, just in case. The wind had picked up, tossing grit across the van's windshield. I remember how the dust made patterns, almost shapes like faces for a split second before vanishing. Then we saw someone. A man, maybe in his 50s, standing in the doorway of the store, not moving, just watching us. His clothes looked old-fashioned, like something out of a 1970s truck stop. He didn't wave, didn't blink. Maybe he works here?" I said, though I didn't believe it. Jay honked lightly. The man didn't react. The silence that followed didn't feel normal. It wasn't just quiet, it felt heavy. We left, fast. No one said anything for miles. The radio was dead static, even though it had worked fine earlier. About 20 minutes later, the highway reappeared out of nowhere. When I looked back through the rear window, the turnoff we'd taken was gone, like it had never existed. We didn't talk about what happened that night. Not really. Every time one of us brought it up, someone would joke, "Kansas ghosts," or "maybe we hallucinated," and then crank up the music. But we were all thinking the same thing, that something had been off. By the time we hit Colorado, it almost felt funny, like a weird road trip story we'd tell later. Except it didn't stay funny. 3 days later, somewhere near the Utah border, the van started acting up. The gas gauge would drop to empty, then bounce back to half full. The radio still flickered with static, no matter what station we tried. We blamed the desert air, the altitude, the heat. It was around dusk when we pulled into a small highway town to refuel. I'll never forget the way the sign looked in our headlights. Miller's Junction, 8 miles. At first we laughed. "Guess every state's got one," Jay said. But as we rolled into town, my skin started crawling. Same layout, same gas station, same faded Pepsi logo. And standing in the doorway of the store, same man, same clothes. Jay slammed the brakes so hard we all jerked forward. None of us said a word. The man lifted his hand and pointed toward us. Just pointed, slowly.
Then the van's engine cut off. All at once, everything died. The lights, the radio, even the dash clock. The only sound was the wind, whistling through the broken window seal. "Try it again," I whispered. Jay turned the key. Nothing. I looked out the window, and the man was gone. We stayed that way for maybe a full minute, nobody breathing, before the van's engine sputtered back to life on its own. We tore out of that place fast than we nearly hit a tumbleweed the size of a dog. When we finally stopped, 20 miles down the road, I checked the map. There was no town marked anywhere in that area, just empty highway. That night, none of us slept. I swear I kept hearing static, faint, distant, like a radio that wouldn't shut off, even though the van battery was disconnected. We woke up the next morning at a roadside motel that looked like it hadn't seen a new guest since the Clinton administration. Peeling turquoise paint, buzzing neon sign that said VACYN, and an old Coke machine that ate your quarters without apology. No one talked about Miller's Junction, but the silence between us had changed. It wasn't tired anymore. It was tense. Jay was the first to break it. "So, we're not crazy, right? You all saw him too?" We all nodded, even Eric, who was usually the skeptic of the group. He looked pale. "I checked the map again last night," he said. "That town doesn't exist. Not in Kansas, not in Utah, not anywhere." We tried to laugh it off, but by then the trip had lost its charm. Everyone just wanted to make it to California and go home. The van had other ideas. About an hour after leaving the motel, it started making this grinding noise, like metal scraping on metal. Jay pulled over near a rest area in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't even a real stop, just an old picnic table, a rusted trash can, and a view of endless desert. We popped the hood. The engine was fine. Too fine. It wasn't even warm, despite running for an hour. Then we realized Eric wasn't with us. At first we thought he'd wandered off to pee, but 10 minutes passed, then 20. His bag was still in the van, his phone too. Jay and I started shouting his name, walking around the scrubby hills until the heat made us dizzy. No footprints, no sound, just wind. And then, somewhere far off, we heard a radio. It was faint, static-filled, but there was music. Old country, twangy and slow, like something out of a diner jukebox. We followed it for maybe a minute before it cut out, leaving only silence again. We ran back to the van, panicked. Jay turned the key and the van started immediately, like it had been waiting for us. We drove, fast, too fast. Nobody spoke. The air inside the van felt electric, like we were sitting inside a storm. When we finally pulled into a gas station near Moab that evening, the attendant looked at us funny. "Y'all okay?" he asked. Jay nodded, barely. "Our friend's missing. We need to call the police." The guy frowned. "You mean the tall one with the plaid shirt?" Jay froze. "Yeah." The attendant pointed to the vending machines near the restrooms. "He was here this morning. Said y'all would be right behind him." But we hadn't stopped there before. We hadn't even been in Moab until now. We didn't find Eric that night. The cops in Moab took our report, asked the usual questions. When was the last time you saw him? Was he acting strange? Any history of mental illness? And promised to keep an eye out. But they didn't look convinced. By midnight, we were sitting in the van outside a 24-hour diner, staring at our untouched plates of greasy eggs and pancakes. None of us wanted to say it, but we all felt it. He was gone. The next morning, Jay woke me up at sunrise. "You need to see this," he whispered. Eric was standing in the motel parking lot. Same clothes, same backpack. But something about him looked wrong. His skin was too pale, like the color had been drained out. and his eyes, they were open but not focused. He didn't respond when we called his name. He just smiled, wide, slow, and got into the van like nothing had happened. "Dude, where the hell were you?" He blinked. "You left me," he said simply. His voice sounded flat, like it was coming from somewhere far away. Jay and I traded a look. "No, man, you disappeared. We looked for you for hours." He tilted his head, confused. "I told you I was going to fill up the tank." The van already had a full tank. No one said anything after that. We just drove. But as the miles went by, things got weird. The van's odometer started counting backward. The radio flickered between static and fragments of old songs, like really old, 1950s stuff. Patsy Cline, Johnny Cash. At one point, Eric started humming along, perfectly in tune. Then he said softly, "We're almost back." Jay tightened his grip on the wheel. "Back where?" Eric didn't answer. He just stared out the window, smiling that same wrong smile. When we finally stopped at a diner outside Reno, Eric didn't come in with us. We left him in the van for maybe 15 minutes. When we came back out, the door on his side was open. He was gone again. This time, though, there were footprints, leading toward a field behind the diner. We followed them until they stopped abruptly, right in front of a wooden sign, half buried in weeds. The paint was almost gone, but you could still make out the letters. "Welcome to Miller's Junction." We hadn't been anywhere near Kansas for days.
Jay wanted to burn the sign. He actually grabbed the gas can from the back of the van and started splashing it across the wood before I stopped him. "Think about it," I said. "If this thing's following us, what happens when you piss it off?" He just stared at me, jaw clenched. The desert wind was whipping his hair into his eyes. For a second, I thought he might light it anyway. Then he dropped the lighter and walked back to the van. We left the sign there, but I swear I could still feel it behind us, like eyes on the back of my neck. For the next few days, we tried to pretend life was normal. We kept driving west, hitting small towns, staying at chain motels, trying to act like we were still on some fun road trip. But the little things wouldn't stop. Every gas receipt said Miller's Junction at the top, no matter where we stopped. I'm talking Oregon, Nevada, even a Shell station in California. Always the same name, same faded logo. And Eric, he wasn't right. He didn't sleep anymore. I'd wake up at 3 or 4 a.m. and he'd be sitting upright in bed, staring at the wall. One night I caught him whispering something under his breath, soft, rhythmic, like a prayer. I thought it was gibberish until I heard one word clearly. "Return." The next morning, he said he didn't remember saying anything. The air around him felt cold, not metaphorically, actually cold. You could stand beside him and feel the temperature drop. Jay wanted to take him to a hospital, but Eric refused. He said he just needed to get back. When we asked where, he smiled faintly and said, "You already know." That night, we stopped at a rest area just off the I-80. We were too exhausted to keep driving. I took the first shift, sleeping in the back of the van. When I woke up, Jay was gone. Eric was behind the wheel, engine running, headlights cutting into the trees. "Where's Jay?" I asked. He didn't answer, just turned to me with that empty look and said he heard it too. "What?" "The static." Then I realized the radio was on, tuned to nothing but a low hiss. But underneath it, I swear I heard something like a voice, whispering, repeating the same words over and over. "Welcome back." I grabbed my bag and bolted out of the van. I didn't even look back. When the sun rose, both the van
and Eric were gone. I walked for what must have been hours before I got picked up by a trucker heading west. His name was Dale. He talked a lot, and I was grateful for it. Every word he said drowned out that low, buzzing echo that still felt stuck in my ears from the static. When he asked where I was headed, I said, home. It felt good to say it out loud. Like if I just made it back, everything would go back to normal. It took 2 days and 3 rides to reach Ohio. I crashed on my mom's couch that first night, telling her I'd come home early because the trip fell apart. I didn't mention Eric, or the town, or the sign. How could I? I didn't even believe it myself. But something was off. My mom's house looked the same, but not quite. The walls felt closer, the air heavier. Every clock was off by a few minutes, but not randomly. All of them were set to 11:47, the exact time the van had died back in Kansas. I told myself it was coincidence. I reset the clocks, unpacked, and tried to sleep. But around midnight, I woke to the faint hum of a radio. It was coming from the living room. I crept out, half expecting to find my mom watching TV, but the room was dark. The radio was sitting on the shelf where it had been for years, except we hadn't used it since Dad died. It was tuned to static. At first, I couldn't make out anything, just the hiss and crackle. Then, beneath it, a faint melody, an old country song, Patsy Cline, the same one Eric had been humming in the van. I unplugged the radio. It kept playing. My mom came downstairs, rubbing her eyes. "What are you doing up?" she asked. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. She frowned. "Hear what?" The music stopped. For a second, everything was silent again. Then, in that same hollow voice I'd heard on the road from nowhere and everywhere at once, I heard it. "You're almost back." My mom blinked. "What did you say?" I shook my head. "Nothing." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I packed the next morning, told her I needed to see a friend, and left. I didn't even know where I was going, just away. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of my rearview mirror. Eric was standing across the street. Same clothes, same grin. And behind him, partially hidden by fog, was a road sign. Miller's Junction, 8 miles.
I drove for hours. No destination, just motion. As long as the road stretched ahead of me, I felt like I was outrunning it, whatever it was. The fog clung to the windshield like smoke, and the radio wouldn't stay quiet. Every time I turned it off, it turned itself back on, whispering static, the volume pulsing like breathing. By dusk, I was somewhere near Indiana. The highway signs blurred past, all of them smeared by mist. Then I saw one that made my stomach twist. Miller's Junction, 8 miles. No way. No way. I slammed the steering wheel, pulled off the exit ramp, and killed the engine. The air was still, silent. My reflection in the rearview mirror was shaking, like the image itself was vibrating. Then from the side mirror, I saw headlights. A car pulled up behind me. The engine idled for a long minute before the driver's door opened. It was Eric. He walked toward me slowly, one step at a time, like he wasn't in a hurry but knew I couldn't leave. His eyes were dark now, really dark, like there weren't pupils anymore, just 2 hollow circles. "You left," he said. His voice was deeper, almost echoing itself. I tried to start the car, but the key wouldn't turn. My hands were slick with sweat. "Eric, please," I said. "I don't know what's happening. I just want to go home." He leaned closer to the window.
His breath fogged the glass, and when he spoke again, it left a frost pattern, swirling, spiraling inward. "You are home." Then he smiled, and I swear his teeth looked wrong. Too many, too sharp, like something trying to mimic a person, but getting the details off. The fog outside thickened until I couldn't see the road. When I blinked, the world shifted. The interstate was gone. I was parked in front of the gas station. The same gas station. Same cracked pumps, same Pepsi sign, same dead air. And from the store doorway, the man in the trucker's clothes was watching. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, I could make out more shapes, dozens of them, still waiting. Eric opened my door. His hand was cold when it gripped my arm. "Come on," he said softly. "They've been waiting for you too." I tore away, stumbled back into the car, and jammed the key forward. The engine screamed but caught. I hit the gas, dirt flying from under the tires, and sped blindly into the fog. When I looked in the mirror again, the road behind me was gone. No station, no signs, no Eric. Just the endless, gray blur of nowhere. I drove until the tank hit empty, and the road itself seemed to dissolve under my headlights. The world had no edges anymore, just mist and motion, like I was floating through a dream that didn't know how to end. At some point, I realized the gas gauge hadn't moved in hours. The needle hovered just above E, trembling but never falling. That's when it hit me. Maybe I wasn't driving anymore. The landscape outside wasn't changing. The fog thinned now and then, but it always revealed the same thing: dead grass, a stretch of cracked asphalt, a distant flickering light that never got closer. When I finally stopped, the silence was unbearable. I got out, expecting wind, insects, something, but there was nothing. No sound, no smell, no temperature, like the world had been drained dry. I sat on the hood of the car and tried to think back. How long had it been since that first night in Kansas? A week? A month? My phone said June 12th. The gas receipt in my pocket said August 3rd. Then I remembered something from that first night, something small. When we'd pulled into the ghost town, I'd seen a reflection in the store window. For years, I'd told myself it was mine, but it wasn't. It had been Eric's. He was standing behind me before he ever went missing. A gust of cold air hit me then, like the world inhaled. When I looked up, the fog was rolling toward me, thick and fast, and beneath it, just barely visible, I saw shapes moving. Human shapes. I ran for the car, slammed the door shut, and locked it, heart pounding. The static started again, faint at first, then louder until it filled every corner of the car. Then, through the hiss, I heard voices. Not one, many. Men, women, children, all speaking at once, all whispering the same phrase over and over. "Do you remember?" The car's interior lights flickered. My reflection in the rearview mirror began to lag, like it was moving a second slower than I was. I turned my head fast, and for a split second, I saw something else sitting in my seat. Me, or something that looked like me. Same eyes, same face, except it was smiling. I shut my eyes, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers went numb. When I opened them again, the fog was gone. I was parked on an empty road. Daylight, birds, my gas tank reading half full, like nothing had happened. But the clock on the dash said 11:47. Always 11:47. I made it to a diner just outside of Des Moines the next morning, if it was morning. Time felt slippery by then. My phone battery had died overnight, and when I plugs it into an outlet at the counter, it wouldn't charge. The waitress looked at me like I hadn't slept in weeks, which honestly might have been true. I asked if she'd ever heard of a place called Miller's Junction. She stopped pouring coffee mid-motion. "Honey," she said slowly, "you sure you want to be asking about that?" Her voice had the same trembling edge I'd heard in my own 100 miles back. She told me a story, half urban legend, half obituary. Back in the early 1970s, Miller's Junction had been a small highway town. Truck stop, diner, gas station, maybe 24 families. Then one winter night, a tanker crashed on the edge of town and exploded. The fire burned for days. The smoke was so thick it blacked out the sun. Everybody who lived there either burned or left, except a few who got trapped. She didn't look at me when she said that last part, just stared at the wall behind me like she was seeing something else. They say the road never forgot them. That sometimes, when you're driving too long, too tired, you end up there instead of where you meant to go. You can't stay, but you can't leave the same, neither. I asked what she meant by that. She leaned closer and whispered, "You've already been, haven't you?" My throat went dry. I don't know." "Then you have," she said simply, and slid my coffee across the counter. "Drink up before it gets cold." When I looked down, the mug said Miller's Junction Diner in chipped red paint. I ran out so fast I left my wallet on the counter. Outside, parked beside my car, was a familiar blue Dodge Caravan, the same one we'd driven cross-country 5 years earlier. The same dent in the bumper, the same Ohio plates. Through the windshield I saw movement, someone sitting in the driver's seat. It was Jay. His head was tilted slightly like he'd fallen asleep, but when I tapped the window, his eyes opened. He didn't look surprised, just tired. "I tried to get out," he said through the glass. His voice sounded faint, like it was coming from a radio speaker. "I really did." "Jay, what is this? You're dead. He smiled sadly. "No one dies there. We just drive. Until someone remembers." Then he looked past me, toward the road. "They're waiting for you, man. It's your turn." The van's engine roared to life, the headlights flared, and when I blinked, it was gone. Just tire marks in the gravel, leading nowhere. I didn't chase him. I couldn't. But when I got back into my car, there was dust on the passenger seat, fresh, like someone had just been sitting there. And on the dashboard, scratched faintly into the plastic, 8 miles. I spent a year trying to forget. New job, new apartment, new state. I didn't talk about the trip, or Jay, or Eric. I told people the others had moved on, and that the van broke down somewhere in Nevada. It was easier than explaining what really happened. Easier than admitting I still dreamed about the sign every night. Miller's Junction, 8 miles. Always there, floating in the dark behind my eyelids. Sometimes I'd wake up to the smell of gasoline and hot asphalt, even though my room was cold. It was last December when the letter came. No return address, no stamp. Just slid under my apartment door sometime between midnight and morning. Inside was a Polaroid photo, grainy, faded. It was me, standing outside that gas station. Only I wasn't alone. Eric was beside me. Jay, too. Both smiling. And behind us, the sign. In red marker, someone had written on the back, We remembered. Now it's your turn. I almost threw it away, but something in me broke instead. Maybe it was guilt or curiosity or whatever part of the human brain can't stop touching the wound. I packed a bag, filled the tank, and drove. I didn't even look at the map. I just followed the empty stretches of highway until the sky went that purple-gray color I remembered. My GPS froze at 11:47 p.m. That's when I saw it. The turnoff. A narrow road cutting through the fog. No sign this time, just instinct. The headlights caught a glimmer of something metallic in the distance. The old pumps, the store, the familiar layout that shouldn't have existed anywhere on Earth. As I pulled in, the radio turned on by itself. Static, faint at first, then clearer, until the melody formed. Patsy Cline, Crazy. They were there. Jay was leaning against the van, just like he always used to, arms crossed. Eric was sitting on the hood, humming along to the song. They looked normal. Younger, even. Healthier than the last time I saw them. Eric smiled when he saw me. He said, "You finally made it back." I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. The air was thick, not hot, not cold, just still. Jay reached out his hand. He said, "It doesn't hurt anymore, once you stop fighting it." Something in the distance began to glow. Faint orange light behind the buildings, flickering like firelight. The smell of smoke filled the air. I heard people talking, laughing, faint country music drifting through the static. And suddenly, I remembered. The crash, the tanker, the fire. We hadn't made it out of Kansas. We'd never made it out at all. The road trip, the fog, the wandering, all of it had been something else trying to help me understand. When I looked down, my hands were covered in ash. Jay and Eric stood closer now, faces calm, almost peaceful. "It's time," Jay said. The fog rolled in, and the flames behind them grew brighter. I felt weightless, the hum of the radio fading, the static dissolving into silence. The last thing I saw was the sign, half buried in soot. "Welcome to Miller's Junction, Population 3. I don't know who's writing this now. Maybe I finished it before I went back. Maybe it's still me, somewhere between the static and the smoke. But if you ever see that sign, if your radio starts to hum at 11:47, don't stop, don't look, and whatever you do, don't try to remember."